Hey guys, what's going on? This is RJ Game News USA here. Back today with another video, and today we're going to go over the um, review scores for 28 years later, The Bone Temple. Now, I am super excited for this movie, and it turns out this is the most highly rated Metacritic movie for this franchise so far. So it rated better than 28 Days Later, 28 Weeks Later, or 28 Years Later. And I'm excited for that. After seeing the first movie, you know, initially my initial thoughts were a slight disappointment. But then I sat on it, stewed on it, saw trailers for this, figured out what direction this franchise was going, and I got more excited, definitely as time went on. And so I'm gonna absolutely see this movie in a couple days. And if it's like, if I have an outrageous take on this, I'll do another video or a follow up video. But I kind of just want to go over the review scores and see what the critics are saying because my hype levels are through the roof and I just can't wait. So we have 34 positive reviews, 5 mixed, 79 overall on Metacritic, which is pretty good for a Metacritic movie. 95 is the high score from Polygon, saying, in spite of the heavy odds stacked against it, 28 years later, The Bone Temple is one of those perfect middle entry movies. It elevates what came before and throws down the gauntlet for whatever might follow. Consequence with a 91 says The Bone Temple once again pulls off the 28 Days Later trick of finding moments of grace at the end of the world with enough beautiful moments for balance to balance out grotesque ones. And we have the playlist with a 91 saying The Bone Temple does have plenty on its mind about illness and outbreaks, perhaps the sickness that is marked and the kind of freak show we doom scroll witness every day. It simply buries those thoughts under layers of bloody visceral and wreckage. And we had the Daily Beast with a 90 saying, as the fourth entry in the long running franchise, written like its ancestors by Alex Garland, it is, to borrow a phrase uttered by its protagonist, miraculous, and marks the zombie saga has a nightmare with few equals. Screen Daily with a 90 says, bold, bloody, and blisteringly brutal. This exhilarating follow up to last year's 28 Years Later grabs its audience by the throat from the off and never loosens its grip. And we have Variety with a 90 saying, for genre aficionados, it's bold, mind bending work which satisfies that so often frustrated craving for a zombie movie with brains. Ooh. What about Screen Rant with a 90? The magic of DaCosta's film that tells us, regardless of who you are, that we're all searching for the same thing, community and a place to call home. Looper with a 90 says DaCosta arrives in the world of 28 years later with confidence, swagger, and infectious energy, delivering the 28 Years Later Bone Temple, one of the best horror sequels in recent memory, and a must-see for 2026. That's good. I think it sounds like it's better than the first 28 Years Later, honestly. The film verdict with an 88, juggling big ideas and white-knuckle scares has always been the currency for 28 Days Later saga. And Nia DaCosta does right by the franchise's legacy. RogerEbert.com with an 88 says, if there's one misstep to the Bone Temple, it's the ending, which features a cameo that alters the tenor of the picture's emotional hostility. Well, remember, the ending to the original 28 Years Later, which is setting up for this movie, originally had me rage-inducing, but then I kind of view it more as an action movie now, and it kind of softened the blow, in my opinion. The Associated Press with an 88 says there's plenty of good music in 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple, including Radiohead, Everything is in the Right Place, and one of the most gloriously unhinged uses of Iron Maiden's The Number of the Beast ever conceived. Wow, that's got me excited. New York Post with an 88. Phineas is magnificent, and a scene involving him and Iron Maiden's song Number of the Beast will go down as one of the most buzzed about sequences of 2026, where it was written for a grisly horror movie. Alex Garland's climax would fit snugly into Shakespearean comedy. The Seattle Times with an 88 says DaCosta takes some big stylistic swings, particularly with the soundtrack, that sometimes makes you feel like you're watching a comedy rather than a horror film. It's a welcome offbeat balm to one of the most intense moments sprinkled throughout and reflects the movie's humor. Interesting. A humorous moment, huh? Film Threat with an 85 says, with Garland crafting the script and DaCosta at the wheel, 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple is a winner on all fronts. It is widely entertaining, never predictable, and explores the clash between superstition and tradition versus hard science. I like that review. That review is very nice so far, I think. The Wrap with an 84 says Nia DaCosta's smart, freaky sequel zoom-ins on the ongoing battle between sense and senselessness until it finds strong connective tissue between science and religion. The AV Club with an 83 says it's a neat surprise that DaCosta extracts more dark humor from the series than Boyle himself. And to continue, we have IndieWire with an 83 saying a strange, hysterical, and thrillingly audacious continuation of a saga about the nature of faith in a godless world. The Bone Temple might appear to be more of a traditional genre offering than its immediate predecessor, but don't be fooled. IGN with an 80 says there's a wit and a humor at play in the Bone Temple that elevates in all the right ways. The dramatic stakes of a zombie apocalypse working on its third decade, especially in Ralph Fiennes's record collection. Total Film with an 80 says Nia DaCosta turns things up to 11 with an energized take on the 28 Years Later world. Come for the gore, but stay for the surprisingly frequent jokes and a pair of astonishing performances from Ralph Fiennes and Jack O'Connell. Yeah, it sounds like they really like the acting. An 80 from the Next Best Picture says even with crafts that at worst could be described as serviceable, the narrative and performances are so captivating that they're more than compensate. Empire with an 80 says simple but also bolder and bloodier than its predecessor. The Bone Temple is more than a worthy sequel. The Telegraph with an 80 says in staging the Jimmys' various acts of violence to which they refer horribly as charity, DaCosta may have taken a cue from Kubiak's own Private British Decay, even toughened. Horror fans should find it disturbing. Good. That's what we need to see. The Times with an 80 says, gosh, I hope that Ralph Fiennes' back is okay, because the 63-year-old certainly did a lot of heavy lifting in this latest installment of the long-running zombie franchise. I mean that metaphorically, of course. because in this movie it's up to Phineas to provide the emotional support. And 80 from The Independent said it's rich thematic territory for the series and slowly amps up the audience's anticipation for the moment these two finally cross paths. And when they do, it's spectacular and audacious. The Guardian, with an 80, says this is an exciting, forthright, energized through very gruesome film in which there is a real human jeopardy and conflict. Non-zombies are more cinematic. And we have an 80 from Slash Film saying, I left 28 years later nervous about what might come next. Alex, after the Bone Temple, I'm thrilled at the prospect of where the story could go. That's what I call progress. Collider with an 80 says a stunning movie that continues to solidify the franchise's legacy has one of the best zombie movies to ever hit theaters. Rolling Stone with an 80 says new director Nia DaCosta, the sort of filmmaker who can handle both a continuation from a radically changed Candyman mythology and a radical take on Henrik Bizen's Haida Garber brings pints of fresh blood to the proceedings. And we have a 78 from Austin Chronicles saying DaCosta may divert the series from its withering direction of the green and Pleasant Land's self-image, but her absurdist perspective on this inherently absurd franchise is still undeniably entertaining. The Film Stage with a 75 says with very few locations or characters, the film perhaps operates with a deliberate, necessary austerity after so many resources went into Boyle's predecessor. The Film Maven with a 75 says 28 years later, The Bone Temple is not only better than its predecessors, it's one of the first great movies of 2026. Well, that's not saying a lot because it's only been a few weeks of 2026. Hollywood Reporter with a 70 says if audiences can accept a sequel that has veered into something closer to folk humor than its zombie adjacent roots, they should be able to plug into this peculiar wavelength. And I think I might be plugged in. A 70 from the Globe and Mall Toronto says 28 years later, The Bone Temple doesn't quite live up to the earlier film's promise. At least it's ambitious and compelling enough staging ground biting time with cruel violence more stomach turning than ever as it sets up the already in the works final chapter. That's really the first review that felt any kind of negative so far. But now we're in the mixed category. A 60 from the Irish Times saying the new film, evocatively shot by Sean Bobbitt, feels like a trivial if entertaining diversion on the way to a more substantial closing fall. So they don't like the middle part, basically. Time with a 60 says The Bone Temple is part satisfying triumph, part missed opportunity, and its phases and misuses bump against one another in jangly discord. Kind of a weird review. A 50 from Slant Magazine says The Bone Temple doesn't pack the moment-to-moment kineticism of the prior films. San Francisco Chronicle with a 50 says although more Phineas is always a good thing, 28 years later The Bone Temple simply doesn't have the solid storytelling or enthralling characters that its predecessor has. And 50 was the low score out of everybody, and the Boston Globe had one saying Phineas has an excellent rapport with Lewis Perry, making their scenes as compelling and moving as anything 28 years later had to offer. It's too bad that every time the Samson Kelson plot line gets good, we're yanked back into poor Jimmy's goofy gang. Ah, dang. So, anyway, guys, what do you think about these reviews? Are you hyped for 28 years later, The Bone Temple? I'm pretty fucking hyped. I'm pretty close to a 10 as far as being hyped. I'm going to see this movie in a couple days, and I'm excited to see what I think about it. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Are you going to go watch 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple? If so, let me know. If not, let me know. But I do highly recommend this movie. But for now, this is RJ signing out. Have a good one.